We aren't actually looking at anything when we scroll. We're just waiting for something to make us feel alive enough to put the phone down. But it never happens. It's like we're trapped in this perpetual waiting room of the mind, swiping through other people's lives, hoping to catch a glimpse of our own. The real crisis of our generation isn't that we have short attention spans, it's that we're terrified of what happens when the screen goes black and we're left alone with the echo of our own thoughts. We've outsourced our loneliness to an algorithm that profits off our inability to sit quietly in a room. We treat stillness like a symptom of a disease. Like if we aren't constantly consuming or producing or optimizing, we're somehow decaying. But the truth is, the most violent act of rebellion you can commit right now is to let your life become completely, beautifully boring, to intentionally choose the slow, unoptimized moments. Because the internet has convinced us that every second needs a purpose, when the whole point of existing is just to experience the weight of a Tuesday afternoon without needing to broadcast it to the world. You know that feeling when you close an app, lock your screen, and then immediately open the exact same app 2 seconds later? It's a glitch in the human operating system. It's the modern ritual of looking into an empty fridge, hoping something new magically appeared since you last checked 5 minutes ago, except the fridge is a slot machine designed by psychological behavioral experts paid millions of dollars to keep your eyes glued to the glass. It's exhausting, honestly. This silent, collective pressure to constantly perform our existence, even to ourselves. You look at your phone to check the time, and suddenly you're 3 hours deep into a digital rabbit hole you don't even care about. Watching someone maximize their morning routine in a minimalist apartment that looks more like a high-end dentist's office than a home. The internet makes us feel crazy because it gamifies consciousness. Everything is a metric now. Your hobbies have to be a side hustle. Your rest has to be active recovery. Even the way we relax has been packaged into aesthetic categories. If you're reading, you need to be tracking it on an app, hitting a digital reading goal, curating a perfect bookshelf for a 5 second video clip. If you're working out, it needs to be logged, analyzed, optimized. We've turned the simple act of living into a corporate performance review where we are both the toxic boss and the overworked employee. We look back at how our parents lived when they were young, spontaneous, a little messy, deeply unmonetized, and it feels like a myth, a fairy tale from a time before the collective consciousness was plugged into a permanent dopamine drip feed. They just existed. I asked my mom once what she did on a random rainy Tuesday afternoon in the 90s when she was my age. She looked at me kind of confused and said, I don't know. I think I just stared at the ceiling and listened to the radio until my friend called the house phone. Stared at the ceiling for an hour without a screen. To us, that sounds like a form of psychological torture. It sounds like a punishment. But to her, it was just a Tuesday. There was a peace in that boredom, a safety. Her brain wasn't constantly being forced to have an opinion on a geopolitical crisis, a celebrity scandal, and a micro trend all within the span of 30 seconds. She was just a person in a room waiting for the rain to stop. Now, we don't even give our brains the space to form a unique thought before we smother it with a 15-second clip of a stranger's vacation. We're so terrified of missing out on the global conversation that we're completely missing out on our own lives. We've traded the deep, grounding texture of reality for a flat, glowing piece of glass. And the worst part is, we know we're doing it. We sit there feeling the thumb fatigue, feeling the slight headache behind our eyes, completely aware that the loop is hollow, yet unable to break it because the alternative feels like staring into a void. So a while ago, I decided to stop trying to optimize my escape. I stopped downloading productivity apps to limit my screen time because, ironically, tracking your phone usage just keeps you looking at your phone. Instead, I started trying to cultivate a life that was boring enough to be real. I wanted my days to look a little more like that myth of the past, closer to the ground, spontaneous, fewer obligations to the digital collective. I started doing things that have absolutely zero transactional value, things that don't serve a future version of me, but just comfort the current anxious version of me sitting here right now. I bought a cheap sketchbook and started drawing again. I'm not an artist. I don't know anything about anatomy or shading or perspective. In fact, everything I draw looks vaguely deformed, like a cartoon character that didn't fully finish rendering. But I sit there for hours dragging a pencil across paper, watching lines form. There's no undo button, there's no comment section, there's no metric to tell me if the drawing is good or if it's trending. It's just carbon on paper, a physical manifestation of wasted time. Sometimes I feel this sharp pang of guilt, this voice telling me I should be studying or working or doing something productive, but I'm trying to learn that it's okay to just do things for the sheer quiet joy of doing them. Procrastination gets a bad reputation, but maybe sometimes your brain is just begging you to stop performing and start playing. I started writing too, every single day, not for an audience, not for a script, not for an assignment, just words in a notebook. In a world where AI can generate a flawless, profound text in 3 seconds, the act of writing by hand feels like a quiet, stubborn mutiny. It forces you to, think at the speed of ink. You can't copy and paste your thoughts. You can't delete them cleanly. You have to sit with the awkwardness of your own vocabulary, the clunkiness of your phrasing. But as you write, something strange happens. The noise in your head starts to organize itself. You realize that if you can learn to think clearly on paper, the world outside becomes a little less overwhelming. Speaking becomes easier because you've already met your thoughts in the dark. It frees you from the anxiety of needing external validation for your perspective. Your thoughts become yours again, not just a mishmash of the last 5 tweets you read. And I started moving my body without a smartwatch telling me how many calories I burned or what my heart rate variability was, just walking, no podcasts in my ears, no upbeat playlist to maximize my stride or keep my energy high, just the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement, the ambient hum of traffic, the wind. At first, it's agonizing. Your brain literally screams for a notification, a ping, a hit of something new. It feels like withdrawal, but if you walk far enough, the screaming stops. It turns into a low hum, and then eventually it just becomes quiet. You start to notice the weirdly shaped tree at the corner of the street. You notice the way the light catches the brick on the old building downtown. You realize that the world isn't a content feed, it's a physical place with weight and texture and seasons that don't care about your algorithm. I even started reading differently. I used to buy books based on what I thought I should read to be smart or what was popular on the internet, which just made reading feel like homework. Now, I'm incredibly protective of my attention. I read slower. I mainly read to feel connected to someone else's mind across time and space, to improve the way I understand language, but mostly just to let myself get lost. I'm learning to stop living solely for my future self, the one who is supposed to be successful and perfectly put together, and start being present for the person who is alive right now in this exact imperfect second. We're all waiting for the world to slow down, but it's not going to. The screens are only going to get brighter. The algorithms are only going to get smarter. And the temptation to completely disappear into the digital collective will only grow. The pressure to stay plugged in feels massive, like a tide pulling you away from the shore, but you don't have to participate in the race to be perceived. You don't need to fix your life by replacing your phone habits with a highly disciplined, hyper productive routine that you secretly hate. You just need to give yourself permission to be bored again, to let the day be a little empty, because it's in that emptiness, in those quiet, unscripted gaps between the noise, that you actually find yourself waiting, not for a notification, not for a message, just there, alive. Anyway, I think I've talked enough. The sun's coming down and the room is getting dark. I think I'll just sit here for a bit before I turn on the lights. No phone, just the dark.